Money. This is this is such a trigger point for people. Money is hard. And this is the most difficult thing to really understand is that money is a lagging indicator. Looking at your revenue, looking at your profits, all of that stuff, that's all a result of all the stuff that you have done. So you can't optimize the result, right? You can only optimize the pieces that create the result. So money is a result, not a goal. Now, there's really only four numbers that you really need to know and think about. How is your revenue compared to your goal? Simple. If you're on pace, awesome. If your goal is that $50,000 in new revenue in the first quarter, and you end up with $48,000 in new revenue in that first quarter, yeah, you're on pace. Like, so you don't really need to think much more about it. Now, if your revenue goal was $50,000 and you generated $8,000, holy moly, a that means that everything's off. Number two, expenses versus budget. So we'll give you some numbers later, but are you spending what you agreed to spend, or did you not account for things? Are you putting some money away for taxes? If you don't, eventually it's going to bite you in the ass. It sucks, but it's true. And then finally, what's left after you take out all the expenses and taxes? What's the real profit? Like, those are the only things you really need to think about. And you kind of got to know these numbers, because if you don't know these numbers, you're screwed. Because otherwise, you're you're winging it. You don't have a plan. All right. So there's one number that drives all the rest, and it's revenue versus goal. Because every other number is a function of revenue. So if your revenue is awesome, that means that your expenses can be higher. It also means that your tax obligation is higher and your profit might be higher. But if your revenue is smaller, that demands that you've got to adjust your expenses. It also means that your tax obligation is going to be lower, and it almost certainly means that your profit's going to be lower. So those three other financial functions, expenses, taxes, and profit, they all feed off of revenue. So if you don't know your revenue numbers, you can't possibly know the rest of your numbers. And well, revenue, there's that old saying that revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. That's very true, but everything is a function of revenue. The level of expenses that you can afford, how much tax you're going to pay, the profit that you have available. All of that is driven by revenue. So understand that if your revenue is not where you need it to be, or if it's very different than you have planned, that changes the money picture everywhere. And so many people will think, well, our revenue's down, but we'll catch up next quarter. And so we'll keep our expenses the same. That rarely works. So when that box changes, it means you might have to make some hard decisions like firing people or cutting software or reducing paid marketing expenses or accepting less profit distribution. Like that's a lot of hard decisions, but if you got a C in your title, that's the job you signed up for. So revenue is the thing that helps you make all of the other decisions. And that's stupid and dumb, but true. All right, the way that I want you to think about your business is these buckets. You've got income, and some people have different bank accounts for these things. Um, that's the way that I did it when I was running my agency. Um, now that I have a very small team, I actually run it slightly differently. But what I want you to think about is income. Like all your sales activities, bam, that goes into an account that's cool, awesome, it's great. And then when it comes time to paying bills, you have your OpEx, your operating expenses. So that would be payroll, rent, software stuff. And if there's no money in that account, you can't go and spend money that you have not allocated to operating expenses. So you might have money in your income bucket, but if you haven't already allocated it to operating expense, you can't really spend it unless you change other stuff, right? Because there's no like fudging here. Tax, every dollar that comes in, put aside something for the tax. April's coming, the IRS is coming. I don't want to like scare you, but like it makes it so much easier if you do it this way. That way you don't have to think later on like, "Oh my God, like my tax bill is way higher than the amount of cash I have on hand." All right? Now, profit. And as owner operators, this is tough. Profit has rules. Your profit is a fuel tank. It's not like something that lets you spend frivolously. And what is really, really good is if you assign an amount of profit to from your income, from your revenue, you take that and let's just imagine it's whatever. It's 20%. You take that 20%, you put it somewhere else, and that means that you have focused on that profit. So that profit is secured. It means it's not going to get eaten up by OpEx or tax issues because you've put it somewhere and you have mentally separated that bucket of money from your operating expenses. And trust me, that will be a saving grace. Here's the last thing. As owners, you have to pay yourself. You cannot look at your business honestly if you are not part of payroll. If you give yourself the impulsivity of taking a distribution, a profit distribution whenever you feel like it, that that means that none of these other buckets are safe. So, and also you're not being honest about how profitable your business is. And it's going to make you think that you are more profitable than you are because, well, you're you're doing a job for your business and you're the owner. Those are separate roles. So there's a difference between owner salary and profit. So you get paid a salary to do the job, to fulfill the role of the chief executive officer. It is completely separate from your profit distribution rights as a shareholder. Your salary as the CEO is an actual operating expense. And that's quite honestly, like that's non-negotiable. As a matter of fact, you have to pay yourself a fair market, not actually not a fair market rate. You have to pay yourself a fair wage as the CEO of a business. Like that's one of the IRS deals because profit distributions can get taxed at a lower rate sometimes, and there's not necessarily Social Security and all that sort of stuff taken out. Um, so you need to put yourself on payroll. Now, the percentages that you want to think about are, you know, how much do I put where? And so you'll see that these are all ranges here, and they don't all add up to 100, but that's because they're ranges. But you're thinking your salary, 10 to 15% is pretty good. Obviously, as a percentage of revenue, if you're very small, your living, your salary needs are going to take up a much higher percentage of your revenue. So if you're a $400,000 agency, you probably can't live on $55,000 a year. So your salary is likely to be much higher than that 10 to 15%. But if you're at a $2 million agency and you're drawing, you know, somewhere between, whatever, 200,000 and $300,000 in as a salary, you can justify that. I mean, from a tax perspective, you might want to keep the salary part a little bit lower, but let's just think about it, right? Now, everybody else's salary goes into operating expenses. So, that number might be higher. 20% is a good amount of money to stick in a tax account. Now, the great thing, if you just stick it somewhere and you don't spend it, well, that's just profit. You don't have to spend it. It's just profit. And so if we're looking at, so after all of the expenses paid, or if we're looking at 10 to 20% in terms of profitability, of net profitability, that's pretty good. Now, you want to be closer to the 20% than the 10 generally. And if you can get over 20, that's great. But you really want to make sure that you are thinking about profit as something that you allocate to yourself beforehand, right? Because every dollar that comes into your business has a purpose. It's either going to pay your salary, or it's going to pay taxes, it's going to pay to operate the business, or it's going to be a profit. You can't have a dollar come in and not have an initial job to do. Now, if your operating expenses are too high, it's like 75 or 80%, you've got other problems. So 50 to 60%, like I like if your OpEx is above 65%, there are things that are wrong. You've got too many people, or you're not charging enough, or both. So we really want to make sure that we are thinking about dollars, revenue dollars, having a job when they come in. They're either paying you, they're paying Uncle Sam, they're paying your team, or they're paying your future profit distribution. Now, here is a great thing. Separate the buckets, separate bank accounts. I don't care how you do it, but set the percentages of money that's going to go into each account. Like you review it weekly to make sure that you're on track. You look at that big number one, your revenue, if that's changing, obviously your expenses, your tax savings, and your profit distributions are going to change. So sort of reforecast what you think is going to happen monthly. And that does not take very long, believe it or not. And then you distribute profits no more often than quarterly. Because honestly, months lie, quarters tell the truth. 2 quarters tells more truth. 4 quarters tells even more truth. But we really want to make sure that your money has a job. This is something that I put into my business. I didn't write it down here, but I actually only make significant decisions. And significant decisions, I just count it as, is this going to cost me more than $10,000? I only allow myself to make those decisions twice a year, January and July. Because if I give myself permission to make those decisions any other time, I may not be looking at the reality of what is happening in my business. Now, my business is different than your business. My business is small, and you might not be able to do that, but you should limit your purchase decisioning to a narrow point. So maybe it's quarterly that you make or yeah, it's quarterly and you are making your plan for the next quarter. But that really does, that lack of variability allows you to recover from bad choices. Because often what happens is you make a bad choice, you decide to spend money with the idea that revenue is going to increase or profits are going to increase or whatever, and it doesn't happen. And so you made a choice around an event that did not occur. So then if you're only making these choices quarterly, there's the opportunity to recover because when you make a bad choice, it's pretty often that you make another bad choice trying to fix it. So if you're paying yourself and you're keeping your profit reasonable, like you're going to have some money in the bank.